What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 7 of our podcast. This week, Austin won't be joining us, unfortunately. We had some scheduling conflictions. So this week, it's just going to be me talking, and I'm so sorry because now you have to listen to me talk for the better part of 20 to 30 minutes. So, with that, let's go ahead and jump right into our topic. And this week, I'm going to be talking about self-care. And self-care is something that I'm very passionate about, not only within my own personal life, but I'm also passionate about it in regards to other people and how other people take care of themselves. And really, I think self-care boils down to knowing how to deal with stresses in your life, but also knowing how to prevent unnecessary stresses from occurring. Because, as they say, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And I think that that applies to a lot of things within life. And if you can prevent yourself from getting stressed and getting worked up and getting anxious and things like that, it's a lot easier to rid yourself of those things as opposed to continuously having to play catch up with yourself and work on problems that you have while also attempting to deal with the problems that are currently happening to you. You don't want to be trying to fix your past and also trying to play catch up by trying to fix your present and worrying about the future all at the same time. That's just too much to handle. But with that, I just wanted to talk about a couple aspects of self-care, some of the aspects of self-care that are most commonly neglected in my opinion, and some tips and practical steps that you can take to improve your life just by focusing on yourself a little bit. And I know that today's culture can focus a lot on don't be so selfish, think of others. But in my general experience, I find that a lot of people don't take any time to focus on themselves because either one, they don't know how, they feel guilty to do so, or maybe they just feel pressure to always think about other people, whatever the reason may be. But regardless, I do think that it's something that's extremely important to focus on because how can you treat other people well if you don't treat yourself well? How can you make other people happy if you aren't happy? How can you bring joy to the world if you don't have joy within yourself? How can you bring stability and peace to those around you if you don't have stability and peace within your spirit and your soul and your mind? With that, I'm going to start talking about a couple of things, a couple areas of self-care. So, just off the bat, you've got mental self-care and physical self-care and spiritual self-care. I think those are probably three of the biggest forms of self-care. And within each of those, I think setting boundaries is something that's extremely important. And what I mean by that is, I'll give you some examples. This kind of jumbles mental, spiritual, and physical all together. I have a nighttime routine that I try to follow it every night. And that's another thing. A big part of self-care is forgiveness, which is exactly what this podcast is all about. And that's why we say we're so sorry, because we are apologizing to you guys as the listeners for the things that we say, because sometimes we say things that are a little bit out of pocket. And we are so sorry, and I'm apologizing on Austin's behalf because I know he would say the same thing. But we're also apologizing to ourselves. We're apologizing to the past versions of ourselves that didn't know the things we know now that we should have. And we're apologizing to our future selves because in the future, we're going to have to look back on our present selves and apologize and forgive ourselves for not knowing things that we should know right now that we don't, that we will not know until the future when we go through certain experiences. With that, my nighttime routine is more or less generally as follows. I will read a daily devotional in my Bible. Right now I'm following a Read the Bible in 1 Year plan, and today is day 15 in February plus 31 days in January. So that's about 46 days so far. And I haven't been 100% with it. I have missed a couple days, I will admit. I am a faulty person just as the next guy, but I have made a commitment, and something that I've done to keep me on track with that is that I've told other people about my commitment, so that if someone inquires about it, I can say, you know what, actually, I've been slacking. I need to do better with that. Thank you for reminding me. And on the opposite side, if someone mentions it to me and I've been doing good with it, it's almost like a little bit of self reimbursement or self praise or just a little bit of acknowledgement, not a selfish kind of acknowledgement, but just a little moment where I can kind of pat myself on the back and be like, you know what? That's a form of integrity because I'm keeping my word to myself. And this person cares enough to ask me about my commitments, and I've been actually sticking to it, and I'm proud of myself for that. I don't think there's anything wrong with being proud of achievements that you have made and sticking to the goals that you choose. So I read a Bible devotional every night, and about an hour and a half before I go to bed, my Google Home will tell me that I have 90 minutes before I go to bed and that I should start my nighttime routine. When I have 90 minutes until I go to bed, there's a couple things that I have to do or that I want to do. So I like to think of all the things that I have to do the next day. This is especially useful on weekends when I'm not doing other things. And it allows me to have everything nice and neatly written out so that I can get things done that I need to get done. And then once I plan the next day, I like to do some additional reading in whatever book I'm reading at the time, whether it is just for fun or to learn something. And I like to take notes as well. And I'll usually read about one chapter a night or about 20 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes, give or take. And then something that I also do is I keep an audio journal. And this is something that I've been doing for quite a while. Essentially what I'll do is I'll just go on my phone or use a handheld recorder and summarize my day. And as months and years go by, I can go back and listen to the recordings that I've made. And there are things that I completely forget that I remember by listening to these recordings. And it's very interesting. And it's a very fun way to kind of look back on my past and also be excited about the future because I'm reminded about all the interesting and fun things that happen within my life that have happened to me and will continue to happen. Just because I don't remember them doesn't mean that they won't happen again and that they haven't happened. And the last thing that I do every night is I do a before bed devotional. It's about 5 pages of just some affirmations from God and things that I like to meditate on before I go to bed. And then I also pray for my loved ones, my friends, those around me, anything else that's on my mind, things like that. I'm really just trying to clear my mind, calm my mind, and prepare myself for the next day, but also calm myself down from the day that I just endured. And a side note that I'm going to add, another thing I like to do, especially while I'm doing my nighttime reading and note taking and getting ready for my next day by planning out the things that I need to do, I really like to watch calming types of content, video content. The thing that I watch the most is Bob Ross, the Joy of Painting series on YouTube. It is amazing. It's a great way to wind down. Another example I can think of that I occasionally watch is Mr. Rogers. I can't remember exactly what his show was called. I believe It's a Wonderful Day in the Neighborhood. I might be butchering that, but that was another thing from my childhood that I really enjoyed. And so just really watching and taking in positive, calming content while I am being productive, but also really just slowing down for the day is a great way to initiate self-care. And as an umbrella over all of that, you have to be dedicated. Dedication and boundaries, as I first said before I started listing what my nighttime routine is, I have to set boundaries with myself and say, okay, I have to do this every night or as many nights as I can. And I will be the first to admit that I don't always follow this. I try to, and I really do because it's something that I'm doing for me. I don't do it for anyone else. I'm not trying to prove anything to anyone else by trying to do this, but these are things that I've learned that work for me that help improve my mental state, my physical state, and my spiritual state because you're kind of touching on all of them there. And so I have a time restriction on my phone. my phone turns off at 9:45 every single night. And if I'm on the phone with somebody, I have to hang up. If I'm texting somebody, I have to let them know, hey, I've got to go to bed. And I don't actually typically go to sleep until about 45 minutes after I got off my phone, but I'm using that 45 minutes just to have time to myself. And keeping company with yourself and being content with your own company is another thing that is really important when it comes to self care. And so I think that having a nighttime routine or just a routine in general, something that you do daily or every other day or even weekly, is very important because you are reminding yourself that you have value and you are reminding yourself that you are worthy of taking care of yourself and continuing to grow and maintaining your health, whether that be physical, mental, spiritual, whatever that may be. And as of recent, I've had a little bit of a cold or some type of sinus infection. I'm a little stuffy, I'm a little congested. So I'm so sorry if I sound really kind of gross. I am trying to clear it all up. I'm taking some cold medicine. I'm trying to shower like twice a day just to kind of clear up everything. But especially now is a time that it's very important to initiate and maintain and be dedicated to self care. And in addition to that, as I mentioned on last week's episode, fortunately, I do have a hernia. I might even have a double hernia. So I'm going to have surgery to get that fixed. I've got surgery about 2.5 or 3 weeks from now, and I'm going to be stuck in bed doing recovery for about 2 weeks after the surgery. So everybody, please keep me in your thoughts and prayers if possible. I'd really appreciate that. But that's another thing. I'm really just going to have to focus on self care and just trying to get better and recover. And then about 6 weeks after surgery, I'm allowed to start lifting very light weights, about 5 to 10 pounds. And then I can do very small incremental weight after that, maybe an additional 5 pounds every 2 weeks or so, maybe more than that. But I'm really going to focus on building up my core and building up my strength, but not trying to push it, not really worrying about the actual numerical weight, but just focusing on my strength and how I actually feel physically and mentally, and not trying to push it farther than I need to, and listening to my body if I feel pain or stress, knowing when to take a break. And that's another form of boundaries. And so, in addition to everything that I just said, having a routine is very important. And I highly recommend it to anyone that doesn't always follow a lot of structure in their day to day life. You may find that it really helps you just fill that gap. Also, I'm just going to lightly touch upon physical self care because although I've lightly brushed upon it, there's a lot of other things that you can do as an individual to help take care of yourself. And one of those things is these are all things that I do or have done. Um, and if I'm not currently doing them, it's most likely because I am kind of incapacitated with my hernia. But on a regular day to day basis and on a weekly basis, I am doing these things because one of the things about myself is that I really try to practice what I preach. I'm not going to try to tell you guys to do something or recommend something that I don't do myself. And as I said when I was talking about my nighttime routine, I prefer to follow it every day. I don't always, but if you care enough and you're dedicated enough, you'll stick to it. And the longer you stick to it, the more you'll see those benefits. So with that, I'm going to list a couple things here about physical self-care. And one of the things that I do is I try to work out 5 to 6 times a week. And obviously with my hernia, I haven't been doing that as much, but that is definitely one of the biggest things that is contributed to my self-care. Another thing I do is I take a multivitamin every day, just in the chance that I have a vitamin deficiency or an area that I'm lacking in a chemical imbalance, something like that. Just something to boost my immune system to help me keep myself healthy. And although I have a cold right now, I have not been sick, so to speak, in over a year. I had COVID in January of 2021, and this is my first time being sick since then. So, and I have been taking the vitamins essentially since then. So, that's another thing that's really been helpful. I take a multivitamin. I also take a vitamin D supplement in addition to that. Another thing that I do that has been extremely, extremely helpful is I created a family tree of health, or lack thereof in this case. Essentially, what I've done is I've gone around to my immediate family and I have inquired if they're willing to share. I've inquired about their medical history or their immediate family's medical history. So I went to my mom, my dad, my grandparents, my uncle, other people that I could think of in my immediate family. And I asked them about the biggest health issues that they've had throughout their life, the age at which they were first diagnosed with the health issue, even minor things like asthma or vitamin deficiencies, and things as large as cancer or heart disease or high blood pressure, everything I could think of. And I kind of made a family tree all leading down to me. And I labeled everyone with the health condition that they have or had, the age, like I said, at which they were diagnosed, and whether or not they were treated or not, whether it's chronic. And I took that to my healthcare provider, my doctor, and I provided them with that, and they kept it. And so now I've got that on my record as to know when I go in to the doctor, I can get tested and checked for certain things once a year, twice a year, whenever I go in for a checkup. At certain ages, I know when to get checked for things. If I'm having a particular problem that is possible to be related or correlated to another health condition that one of my immediate family members has had or has, it allows me to be diagnosed a lot easier, because I think that a lot of our health problems are hereditary and that they are passed down genetically through our genes and our DNA. And so I think that learning the history of your family is a very important thing. Another thing that I try to do is I try to track the timing of my seasonal allergies, which is not everybody has allergies, but it's something that I try to do because I generally like to take allergy pills, allergy medication, and I've noticed that I have seasonal allergies, so I don't need to take it all year round, but I believe that it's correlated with the blooming of certain flowers or grass perhaps, or bugs or something like that. And so if I keep a log of when my allergies are most prevalent, then I know when I do and do not need to take allergy medication, so that I'm not wasting money on allergy medication 365 days a year when I know that I don't need it. Another thing that's super important is sleep and quality sleep. And I'm being very serious about this. I think sleep is one of the most profound and important things that we need to keep consistent within our lives, because sleep can cause many other health issues, whether it's physical, mental. It correlates to a lot of things. And all the information that I've always seen recommends 7 to 9 hours of sleep every single night. And, I know some people take melatonin or sleep aids in order to get good sleep. I, for one, I wear my Apple Watch when I go to bed every night, and I try to review the data that was collected every morning when I wake up, and it tells me how much deep sleep I got. It tells me my resting heart rate and a bunch of other very useful information that I can use over long periods of time in the macro and micro, just to know if I'm getting good sleep and to know if there's anything else I need to do to improve my sleep. And another thing related to getting quality sleep and getting enough sleep is going to bed and waking up at the same time or a very similar time every day and every night, because the human body is almost like its own clock, and we like to work in succession and in order. So if you go to bed at the same time every night and wake up at the same time every morning, you're not going to get thrown out of whack. You're going to feel more rested in the morning, and you're going to be more ready to go to bed at night when you go to sleep. In addition to that, not using your phone, or at least limiting phone usage 30 to 60 minutes before you go to bed, is another thing that you can do to help fall asleep quickly and efficiently and to stay asleep. And it's something that I do. I get off my phone, as I said before when I was talking about my nighttime routine, I get off my phone at least 45 minutes, sometimes 30 minutes if there's other things I need to do, but at least 30 to 45 minutes before I go to bed. And that way my mind can kind of start winding down, and I'm no longer correlating myself to technology and being subject to blue light and other things that are going to kind of keep me awake, because technology and LED screens or whatever type of screens you use, they prevent the release of sleep chemicals that make you tired. And so that can cause a lot of problems if you're especially using your phone in bed or even in the same room that you sleep in. That's another thing that I do. I refer to this as compartmentalization, and I believe it's something I've talked about in previous episodes. But the way that I compartmentalize my phone usage with my sleep is that the room that I sleep in is strictly for sleep and meditation and relaxation. and I do not bring my phone in my room. Obviously, very occasionally I will if I'm sick, or like when I'm recovering from my hernia, I will, or if it's a Friday or Saturday night and I'm texting friends or playing a game on my phone or watching a show on Disney Plus or on Netflix, I'll bring my phone in my room for 30 minutes to an hour. But over the long periods of time, I do not even bring my phone into my room, and that has proven to be very beneficial because if I keep my phone usage in my studio only or just out and about, and I don't bring it into my room, I'm not going to correlate my phone usage and digital computer usage or technological use with the room that I sleep in. And if I only sleep in that room or meditate in that room, I'm going to start correlating that space as something that is safe, something that is for relaxation and sleep. And so I hope that makes sense to everyone that's listening. It's something really useful that I've started doing within the past 6 months to a year, and it's really helped. And another thing that I'll say about health is drinking enough water. You definitely don't want to be dehydrated. There's a lot of ways to tell if you are dehydrated. I'm not going to go super deep into detail because it can get pretty scientifically confusing and stuff. And you can use like your urine and stuff to tell if you're dehydrated. There's things you can do with your skin. And especially if you're thirsty, if you're thirsty, you're already dehydrated. So making sure you drink enough water. I forgot exactly how much water you should drink every day, but I'm actually thinking about buying one of the, I believe maybe it might be a gallon of water a day. I might be wrong. Forgive me. I'm so sorry if I am. But they do sell water bottles that come in like one serving size, like a 1 day serving size of water. You fill it up at the beginning of the day and you drink it throughout the day until you go to bed. And all you've got to do is drink all the water in there and you're good for the day. They sell ones that are half serving. So you fill it up once, you refill it midday, and then you drink it a second time, and then you're good for your water. But it's really important to stay hydrated. And this is somewhat physical, but also mental as well. And that is taking time to rest. And as a Christian, I participate in the Sabbath, which is technically Saturday for anyone that's wondering. Saturday is the seventh day of the week, not Sunday. Sunday would be the first day. So when God rested on the seventh day, it was Saturday. And so Saturdays, I really just try to veg and just kind of relax. I don't do a lot of strenuous work. And, I still go to the gym on days on Saturdays because it's not job work. It's not strenuous work. It's something that I want to do. So in that respect, I do still work out on Saturdays, and I still do try to keep my routines. I still go to the doctor or go, pick up a prescription or do whatever I need to do. Especially if I'm DJing a wedding on a Saturday, I will do that because that's something that I like to do. But I'm not going to do anything that I don't really want to do on a Saturday. That's what I mean by rest. Another thing that I have is to limit or completely rid yourself of alcohol and drug usage. I don't personally drink alcohol or use any type of foreign substance or drug, but I do know that it's something that a lot of people do recreationally or socially just for fun. But I do think that it can have a lot of negative implications on your physical and mental health. And it's just not something that I am willing to take a risk on. And there are some stories I can tell, some personal stories I can tell about that I definitely will be telling in a future episode, but I'm going to leave it at that for now. Some other things that I'll mention is just your typical day-to-day hygiene, brushing your teeth twice a day, washing your face, getting any extra oil off of your face, exfoliating your skin, flossing your teeth, using mouthwash, showering regularly. Pro tip, if you take showers in the morning and you have trouble waking up, take a 1 minute cold shower. It will wake you up. I believe they call it a micro shock. And you shouldn't do this if you have heart problems. Apparently, you can cause like a heart attack if you've got preemptive medical conditions, heart disease, and things like that. But essentially, with a microshock, what you're doing is it releases certain chemicals within your body. It's almost like doing like a polar plunge or something like that. But it definitely will wake you up, trust me. Eating a healthy diet is another thing that's super important. I try to base my diet loosely around Mediterranean. That means like no soda. I do have a cheat day on Sundays. I'll have like one soda a week. But other than that, I'm not drinking anything carbonated. I try not to drink things with added sugar. So I'm drinking grape juice with no added sugar, apple juice with no added sugar, orange juice with no added sugar, a lot of water. I try to have a yogurt for breakfast or eggs or a banana or an apple. And for lunch, I will have a roast beef or a ham sandwich with some cheese, and I know roast beef is a red meat, and I probably shouldn't be doing that, but I'm not eating out. That's the thing. I'll eat out like once a week on a Friday. Other than that, I'm usually keeping things pretty healthy. I eat a lot of raisins and grapes, basically fruits. I do have about 4 or 5 salads a week with tomato, lettuce, avocado, cucumber, and olive oil as well, and kind of mix that up. I do put a little bit of garlic seasoning and some salt. Not a lot though, because excessive salt isn't good, but just a little bit, just to add a little bit of flavor. I also limit my sugar intake, as I kind of already said. Everything that I drink, I try to make sure it's got no added sugar. I try to limit myself with sweets like cookies and ice cream. And as of recent, just some transparency, I've been struggling a little bit with ice cream because I recently found out that they sell my favorite Baskin Robbins ice cream at the local grocery store, and I haven't lived in Chicago for about 2.5 years, and so I've only had Baskin Robbins about 4 times or 5 since I moved. And now that I found out that they sell my favorite ice cream literally like 10 or 15 minutes away, I kind of can't. I've been having a little bit of trouble helping myself because my grandparents will come home from the store and they'll have bought me ice cream, and it's really hard for me to turn that down. Or my grandma will make strawberry shortcake or cookies, and she'll kind of just bring them into my room and plop them down. And I'm like, well, great. And I don't want to disrespect my grandmother, so I'll have a couple cookies or a strawberry shortcake or something like that. But I try to only do that once a week. So moving away from the physical self-care, I think I've listed a great handful of things that anyone that is interested in introducing self-care into their life can take and use. Feel free to take notes. Feel free to go back and listen again. I try to make these episodes almost in a list order, so I'm not repeating things a lot of times. Occasionally I will, but I'm trying to keep it all organized so that anyone who's listening that does want to take notes, whether it's physical or mental notes, or anyone that wants to follow along can do so easily. And if anyone has any suggestions on how to make that process better for you as a listener, feel free to let us know. We are very open to constructive criticism. So let's talk about mental health, self care, and just mindfulness in general. So I've talked about meditation on this podcast before, and I'm just going to touch upon it again quickly right now. Meditation is something that I've used in the last few months that has really helped me clear my mind. I'm the type of person who I'm always thinking, my mind is always racing. It's very hard to get a break from the mental processes that occur in my mind. Sometimes I have very complex thoughts. Sometimes I have scary thoughts. Sometimes I have terrible, terrible dreams. I have very, very vivid dreams. That's been something that I've been struggling with for a few months that I've been trying to fend off and deal with, because it feels as though every time I go to sleep, I wake up in the middle of the night, or I'll wake up in the morning and I'll have had this dream and I'm like, what the heck? And actually, for a future reference, I might actually talk about some of my dreams, just because some of them are really funny, but I'm talking like hundreds of words that I type out. I keep track of my dreams every night, and I remember hundreds of words worth of detail from my dreams almost every single night. And it's difficult sometimes to just get a mental break because I'm thinking so much during the day from the day-to-day stresses of life. And then I'm going home and going to bed, and I'm still thinking while I'm sleeping. And sometimes I have nightmares and things like that, and that just doesn't help. So meditation and mindfulness has really helped with that. And just to clarify, I've had a couple conversations with people that have asked me exactly what I mean by meditation, and I've actually talked to my youth pastor about it, because as a Christian, I think that a lot of the approaches to meditation, especially Eastern meditation, doesn't really fit the description of what I personally mean by meditation. So I'm just going to quickly, in about 30 to 60 seconds, go through what I mean personally when I say that I meditate. So when I mean meditation, I don't mean yoga. I don't mean chakras. I do not mean chants. I do not mean birthstones, like saying that like I'm a Scorpio or you're a Sagittarius or a Cancer. I don't mean any of that stuff. No star signs, no planet alignments, no anything like that. What I do mean is more like silence and solitude. I will go into my room or lay in bed or lay on the floor in a comfortable position, usually in the dark. Sometimes I'll wear a blindfold. I will light a candle or two, and I will just get super relaxed. I will release all the tension in all of my muscles, and I will usually throw in my AirPods and listen to calming music, whether it's atmospheric music or just a soundscape with birds chirping or waves crashing on a beach or fire crackling, or binaural music, which is something that I really like. Binaural music is essentially music that is put at a certain wavelength that your brain can release certain chemicals when listening to it. Don't know scientifically how true that is, but I've had positive results with that. So it's really just setting the mood or a situation mentally, listening to music. Sometimes I'll do guided meditation. I will control my breathing. I will get into a relaxed state physically and with my breath and my muscles, and just kind of empty my thoughts. I let thoughts pass. I let thoughts come and go. I don't judge myself for thoughts. I take what thoughts that I have, I'll process them, I'll let them go on their way. But my main goal is to try to clear my thoughts, and I just kind of become the music or the sounds that I'm listening to. And that's a really good way to kind of prevent any thoughts from entering my mind. Another thing that I like to do is just focus on my breath, just thinking breathe in or breathe out, or just focusing if I hear my pulse or just feel my pulse in my body. I'll focus on my pulse, just, bum 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 bum, and just kind of do something repetitive, something simple, something that's not going to cause me to think too complex. And I do that for about 10 to 15, sometimes even 20 minutes at a time. And very rarely, but sometimes also occasionally, sometimes a couple times in a row, sometimes it won't happen for a couple weeks, but I will get into a state where I'm having visualizations while I meditate. And it's not something that I'm trying to do because, like I said, again, the whole point is to give myself a mental break. But sometimes I will have literal dreams while I'm awake, like daydreaming while I'm meditating. And sometimes I see things that have symbolic meaning. I've seen versions of myself I have talked about in previous episodes, meditations that I've had that have had very symbolic and intrinsic value to me, things that I'm very glad to have experienced. And so meditation is really useful. But like I said, it's not anything about yoga or doing certain body positions or chakras or star charts or anything like that. It's simply emptying the mind of thoughts and kind of going with the flow and taking time to dedicate to myself and just clearing my mind. And another thing to contribute to mental self care is prayer. And I've talked about prayer a lot on this podcast as well. I'm a very dedicated Baptist Christian. I got baptized in November of 2021. And I'm very glad I did. I'd been contemplating it for a couple years, and I had a couple cataclysm events in my life that really just pushed me to that point where I was like, I don't feel like I'm ready, but I know that's not the point. It's about dedicating my life to the creator of the universe. And I believe in Jesus Christ, and I was ready to do that. And so I have followed up with that. I try to do that day in and day out, especially with my daily Bible reading and my nightly prayer. I like to have a prayer time every single night. I'll also, similar to my meditation, I will light a couple candles and kind of just sit in the floor and before bed, and I'll just kind of talk to God about my day and things that are on my mind, and I'll pray for people that come to mind as well, people that are struggling, people that just need that extra help. And if anyone listening, if any of you as an individual are someone that just needs someone to talk to or someone to pray for you or someone to talk you through a situation, feel free to message me personally or message us on any of our podcast accounts. My personal Instagram is at Niall Blaine 2001 on Instagram, or on our podcast Instagram account at We're So Sorry Podcast on Instagram. That's where you'd get a fast response from either myself or Austin. If anyone needs, our our door is always open. Our virtual door is always open to anyone that's willing to talk to us, and we're always willing to listen. A couple other things that I'll say about mindset and mental self care is your attitude, perspective, and mindset is very important. It's very important to be positive, and that's something that we've talked about on this podcast as well in previous episodes. It's a lot easier to be negative. Once you get in that negative mindset, it's like an avalanche. It picks up. It's going to be more difficult to get out of that negative mindset and to think positively. But if you can get in the habit of thinking positively, and this is something that I definitely struggle with. I'm not saying that, I'm better than anyone else, for saying these things, but these are things that I've just learned, and doing it on a consistent basis makes it a lot easier, and practice makes perfect. And sometimes we'll stumble, sometimes we'll fall, but it's all just about getting back up again and not judging yourself for the fact that you fell, not judging yourself for the fact that you didn't achieve exactly what you wanted, and it's not judging yourself about the negative thoughts that you have, because evidently you will still have negative thoughts and you will still think negatively. That's just how we are. But it's all about making that effort and just always focusing on self progression and being conscious and intentional with that, setting the intention of, I want to do this. This is what I'm going to do. These are the steps that I need to take to do that. Talking with a close friend is also something that has been really useful. And it's also something that we've talked about on this podcast in previous episodes. Austin and I think, are a very good example of that. In the past 6 months or so, Austin and I have been able to confide in each other about a lot of things going on in our lives. And it's really helped. It's really great to just be able to verbally talk about the things that are going on in my life, and to get someone else's feedback, and to know that there's someone there for me. And it's also great to be able to be there for someone else, for me to be able to listen to Austin talk about the things that are on his mind, the things that he has going on in his life. And for anyone that doesn't have someone like that, don't give up hope, because I think that everyone has a friend like that, whether it's just a regular type of friendship or maybe something romantic with a partner who will be there for you in that way. You don't want to take advantage of that person, though. I will say that. It should be an even push and pull. You should be taking care of each other, whether that's in a friendship or in a relationship, or whether it's with your family. If you're going to therapy, I think that can be a little bit different. I'm not saying you shouldn't ask your therapist how they're doing and stuff like that, because I think everyone needs someone to talk to. But, therapy is a little bit more specific. But just having a friend, someone that you're personal with, someone that on a one-to-one basis, someone that you trust a little bit more than you would a stranger, if that makes sense. Having a support circle, I think that's correlated to having just a friend to talk to. But, I'd say my support circle is deeply rooted in my church, and a lot of friends that I have that I go to church with are also friends of mine outside of church, and I do spend time with other people besides Austin. I do have a great handful of friends, and they've all got different talents. And, I really enjoy hanging out and spending time with a lot of the people in my social circle, in my friend group. But just to touch upon therapy again, I do have another note here about therapy. Therapy is, I believe, something that's got a very negative stigma in today's society, especially in Western culture. And I think that stigma needs to be erased, because therapy is not an indication that you have a problem. Therapy is an indication that you have self awareness, and that you acknowledge that you are a human with flaws, and that you don't have to handle everything on your own. And anyone that would judge you for having therapy is not self aware enough to see their own problems. They don't know what they're talking about. They have not spent the time to look at themselves and self reflect. And if they did, they wouldn't be able to handle what they find. And that's all I have to say about anyone judging anyone else about therapy. And I'm not trying to attack anyone if you have negative thoughts about therapy, or, if you've made fun of people for therapy in the past. I'm sure I probably did when I was in middle school. I probably made jokes about therapy, but especially now, being a young adult and having the experiences that I've had, I myself, I have a psychotherapist. I do have regular therapy meetings. I also go meet with my youth pastor about once a week, and we talk about things. And I do talk with Austin on a regular basis as well. And I just have a handful of other people that check up on me, and really just try to take care of my mental state, and the things that are going on in my life. And I try to do the same for them. And so, with that, if you see a psychologist or you see a relationship therapist for your marriage or your relationship, even if you don't have problems in your relationship, I think that relationship therapy is something that's super important, because, like I said earlier, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. You don't always have to go to therapy because you're trying to fix a problem. But like I said in the beginning of this episode, it's a lot better to learn how to prevent a problem than it is to try to fix something. And so if you go to relationship therapy, I think there's a negative stigma against that as well. But if you're going to relationship therapy to learn how to have an improved relationship, or how to continue to grow and have a stronger connection with your partner, I see absolutely nothing wrong with that. It doesn't mean you're on the brink of breaking up. It doesn't mean you're on the brink of divorce. It doesn't mean you're about to separate your children. It doesn't insinuate any of that. in my opinion. And I would actually venture to say that it's safer to go to relationship therapy, especially if you don't have problems, because that's the best way that you're going to prevent problems from arising. And when they do, you will know how to deal with them, rather than taking the problem, letting a problem arise and dealing with it for so long without knowing how to deal with it that you have to go to therapy, and then you've got resentment that's built up in negative emotions and things that you might not be able to move past. So that's my thought on that. Having a life coach. I think having a life coach is something that's also very important. It's similar to a therapist, but it's someone that's going to help you make those every day-to-day decisions. If you're just someone that really struggles with that, and even like working out, having a personal trainer, I think that having a therapist or having a life coach or a psychotherapist or a relationship therapist is like having a personal trainer that you would go see at the gym. They know what they're doing. They know when you tell them your goal, your physical goal, they know how to help you achieve that. They know to look at your body type, your body weight, your height, your gender, your age, your pre-existing health conditions, and they know how to take that information and help you get the body that you want, or help you achieve the weight goals that you want, or help you get a certain bench press weight or a certain squat weight, things like that. I think that a therapist or a relationship therapist gets to know you as an individual, and they're going to be able to take that information, the past traumas that you've had, the emotional issues that you have, if you've got ADHD or any other mental problem, or you've got chemical imbalances, they're going to be able to take that. They're going to be able to give you coping mechanisms in order to help yourself initiate better mental and emotional self-care. And just a small handful of other things that I'm going to list off here before we move on to another aspect of self-care. I think adventure is important. Creativity is important. Mentality, just putting yourself in someone else's shoes. If someone's being rude to you, if someone cuts you off on the freeway, if someone's being, mean to you at work, someone's not having sympathy, your mom or your dad or your sibling just isn't treating you so well today, try to put yourself in their shoes. And I know it's a lot easier said than done, but it really helps put things in perspective. And perspective is something that we've talked about in past episodes. We even had an entire episode dedicated to perception, intention, and subjection. And, when you put yourself in someone else's shoes, you're able to see other people's lives in the way that they are perceiving things from that perspective. And that's going to really help you formulate a new mindset on how to approach certain situations, and maybe not hold grudges and be so harsh when people are doing that to you. And it'll also help you self-reflect and be a little bit more conscious about the decisions that you're making and the way that you're treating other people as well. But also understand that you're human and know that bad things will happen. You will get sick. You will have family members pass away. Your friends might move on. Your relationship might end. And ultimately, you will end up passing away and losing your life as well. So it's all about keeping things in perspective. Don't always anticipate loss and heartbreak and disappointment and illness and things like that. But just keep in mind that those things are very possible. They are very real, and eventually they will happen. But don't worry about it, because worrying about it will not change a thing. And I actually have a Bible verse that I'm going to connect that to. Luke 12:25 and 26, Jesus says, "Who of you by worrying can add a single hour to your life? Since you cannot do this very little thing, why do you worry about the rest?" And that's what I'm going to say about that. Like I said, it's just about keeping it in perspective, but not worrying, because you can't change things from happening, and you can't change what has already happened by worrying. You're just going to make your situation worse. Keep a purpose. Keep a job, keep a hobby, do something that keeps you going. Something that I do is, especially an example that I'm going to use here is church. I wasn't always super dedicated to going to church on Sunday mornings because it was super early, and I wasn't going all the time.
There's 90 minutes until bedtime. Consider starting your nightly routine.
That would be my Google Home, for anyone wondering. And previously in this episode, I'm so sorry. I mentioned that my Google Home will tell me when I have 90 minutes before bed, which means that pretty soon I have to start my nighttime routine. So that's just an example. I'm going to actually leave this in the episode. I was going to cut this out, but I'm going to leave this in just for transparency, just so that you guys know, like I said, that I do practice what I preach, and I really do try to do exactly what I recommend. And And I do try to approach life exactly the way that I present myself on this podcast. And I do think that's as important as a podcast host, that the listeners can believe what you're saying. And I really want to be that for everyone that's listening. But I was having trouble going and consistently going to church on Sunday mornings because I wasn't used to waking up as early as my church service was. And I was laying in bed and watching it on my phone, watching the live stream. But what I decided to do is I decided to start volunteering at my church running the soundboard on Sunday mornings. And what that allows me to do is that I know that there are people counting on me. I know that I have a responsibility. I know that I need to be there or else other people are going to be disappointed and there's going to be a gap that needs to be filled. And the church service can't really go on without my presence because I help do all the mixing and run sound at church. And they need that for worship and they need that to run the live stream. And so by taking on that responsibility, it allows me to be more dedicated. It allows me to consistently go to church. And another example of that would be if you need to keep a consistent sleep schedule, if you take a day off of work to go to the doctor, don't make your doctor's appointment for 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Take the earliest appointment available. Take the 8 o'clock appointment. Take the 8 a.m. appointment. Because when you wake up, you're essentially waking up relatively around the same time as you would typically go to work. Hopefully you wake up at the exact same time that you would otherwise go to work, because that way you keep that consistent sleep schedule. And as I said, our bodies are like clockwork. We really like it when we follow repetition. We like physical repetition. We don't like the exact same thing every single day down to, nuances and things like that. But following a routine can be really beneficial in that sense. So that's another example of that, just a practical example. Another thing that I'll say is to just take one day at a time. Keep things in perspective. Don't worry about the past. Don't worry about the future. Just be in the moment. A phrase that I like is "be here now," and that's actually a book by Ram Dass. I don't claim to believe any of his teachings in a religious sense, but I do think that there's a lot of truth in that statement. Be here now, because that's important. All you ever have is now, and in the book, Concentric Circles of Concern, W. Oscar Thompson warns to not be crucified between two thieves, yesterday and tomorrow. And to me, yesterday and tomorrow are thieves because both the past and future attempt to rob you of what is most important, and that is the time in between both. And to throw in another Bible verse, I do think that the Bible has a lot of philosophical wisdom and spiritual wisdom, and so that's another reason why I really do like to use Bible quotes when I can. Psalm chapter 30, verse 5 says, "Sorrow may stay for the night, but joy comes in the morning." And with perspective, intention, and faith, almost like perception, intention, and subjection, we can learn to truly be one with ourselves in the now, because that's all we get and all we ever will. And so, lastly, when it comes to emotional self-care, I think that laughter is very important. Anyone that knows me personally knows that I absolutely love to laugh, and sometimes I laugh because I laugh. I literally laugh so hard that I wheeze. I sound like a teapot. I have laughed so hard that I can taste blood. I've laughed so hard that I've popped a blood vessel in my face one time right underneath my eye. I laugh real hard. I love to laugh. I've laughed a little bit on this podcast, but honestly, it's nothing compared to the day-to-day. I literally have a folder on my Google Photos account called Me Laughing, and I've got about 55 to 60 videos of me laughing my absolute heart out. And laughter brings so much joy to my life because I laugh at things that, not everyone thinks it's funny, but I think it's absolutely hilarious, and I laugh at the most random things, and I love especially taking videos or when people take videos of me laughing, because then we can all go back and laugh again. And I've got that memory forever. And I really like that. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and close here in a minute, but I am just going to say a couple other things. And there are things that I've mentioned in this podcast that I will probably go deeper into in future podcast episodes whenever I get a chance. One of those being financial self-care. I think that's another thing that a lot of people don't really know about or don't really focus on. And I think it's because a lot of people just don't have exposure to the financial world and personal finance, and they don't have they don't know the lingo, they don't know what they need to know to be financially literate and do what they need to do to have a flourishing retirement. and to be able to follow a budget and things like that. But I will say that having your finances in order is another thing, is another form of self-care, really, because, like I said, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Following and making sure that you have a budget and just making sure your finances are in order is a really great way to prevent financial problems. And as I get older, I'm sure that will become more difficult, but I have made it important enough to myself to follow, and I think that that is very important. But just to close out here, I'm going to say a couple quotes, and a lot of these have to do with boundaries and just self-care in general. And I will say, just a disclaimer, I did mention boundaries at the beginning of the episode, but I forgot to mention another one of the biggest things about boundaries is that they don't have to be just for yourself. They can be within relationships or friendships or whatever. You need to know where to draw the line. You need to know what is right and wrong. If someone is emotionally abusing you, physically abusing you, they are taking advantage of you. They are not reciprocating. They are not trustworthy. They are just not what someone should be. Then you need to take that boundary for what it is, and don't be afraid to lose the time you've invested in a friendship or a relationship or even with a family member. Personally, I think that it is better to move on and heal and learn and grow than it is to put up with something or someone that is going against your values and your morals and is invalidating your boundaries and crossing those boundaries and taking advantage of you. I always think that that is one of the worst things you can do to yourself, because how is that self-care? You're, by allowing people to cross your boundaries and take advantage of you, you are subconsciously telling yourself that that's what you are worth. You are worth being taken advantage of, and you are worth being belittled and not cared for appropriately. And I promise you, it might seem scary, but you will find the right people if you go ahead and take that step and separate yourself. And you might be on your own for a while, but like I said, this whole episode is about self-care, and it's completely okay. Just be with yourself and go out on walks, go walk in nature, go meditate, go pray, go volunteer, go do what you need to, just do anything. Just find a new hobby. Do anything. And I think all of those things, when put in perspective, you can get through anything in life that way. And so a couple quotes that I'm going to say, like I said, I'm just going to throw these out here. I'm not going to give a lot of explanation for all of them, but just some words to think on, some quotes to think about, things that you can apply to your life. And again, feel free to write these down. These are just things that I've accumulated over time. Hear the words, trust the actions. Expectation is the root of all heartbreak. Don't talk, just act. Don't say, just show. Don't promise, just prove. Someday you'll leave this world behind, so live a life you will remember. The only form of a true apology is changed behavior. Proverbs 13:20, walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm. Even the strongest feelings expire when ignored and taken for granted. Never say never. Sometimes when people give you advice, they subconsciously tell you what they would do. Most people can only give advice that they themselves would also take. If you don't know where you're going in life, then you don't know who belongs there with you. The journey of forgiveness also includes forgiving yourself. Take everything with a grain of salt. Bad things can still happen to us even when we are obeying the will of God. Learn the rules to break the rules. That one I'll probably go into more detail in the future. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, as I've mentioned multiple times in this episode. I think that's one of the themes about this episode as well, but it's very important. Sometimes the person whose presence makes you good is the same person whose absence will make you great. You are allowed to want what you are willing to give. That's actually one of my favorite quotes. I actually came up with that. And I will give a little bit of an explanation on that. I do think that if you are willing to give somebody something, whether it's emotional or physical or just simple respect, you have every right to want that back. Within reasonable bounds, of course. But no need to put up with people not treating you with respect. You are allowed to want what you are willing to give. Love is what love does. Something isn't beautiful because it lasts. That's another quote that I love. Don't be afraid to let go of something just because you love it so much you want it to continue. Something can still be great, a great time in your life, just because it's over. It doesn't have to continue for forever. Something doesn't accumulate or lose value based off of how long or short it lasted. That's why the quote is, something isn't beautiful because it lasts. Something is beautiful because it's beautiful. And that's it. Things end, everything ends. And sometimes you need to know when to let go like last week's episode, Austin said he needs to know when to let go in drag racing. And I think that's really important. You need to know when. Like I said last week, you need to know when to let go. You need to know when to move on. You need to know when to ask that person out. You need to know when to take that job. You need to know. Just because you can't solve a Rubik's Cube doesn't mean you can't have fun turning the sides. One of my favorite quotes. We always thought this man was humble until one day he told us he was. Not all that glitters is gold. William Shakespeare. Unconditional love is not unconditional tolerance. And with that, I think I have given a lot of value in this episode. I talked a lot longer than I thought I would, but I really appreciate everyone that listened this long. Feel free to follow us on our social media accounts. We're on Instagram at We're So Sorry Podcast. We're on YouTube at We're So Sorry Podcast. We're on Twitter at We're So Sorry Pod, Pod. We've got our personal accounts linked and all of our other social media accounts linked and all of our biographies on our social media pages. You can find all of our other content within that link. You can find my personal account. You can find Austin's personal account. You can find both of our artists' accounts. Austin makes music as well as I. I do a lot of Austin's production. I myself am releasing an EP, a half-length album. It's going to be getting released today, actually, February 18th. It's called Dear Me, and the premise of the EP is that the songs are songs that my past self would have been proud to hear if I were to hear them when I was about 14 years old or 13 years old when I first started writing music. And if you are interested, please give that a listen. I will try to include a link in this week's podcast episode. I will include a link in all of our social media pages. It will be on all of the streaming platforms under my artist name, Niall Blaine. Feel free to follow me on my artist account at DJ Niall Blaine and definitely check that out. Please let me know what you think. I really appreciate it. Add it to any of the songs to your playlist. That would be really great. I have a collaboration on that EP with a friend of mine, Caleb Daniels. Shout out to Caleb. Thank you for all your help on that song. It's called Accidental. Feel free to check that song out as well on the EP. And like I said, Austin also makes music. Feel free to check out his Instagram account and his music. He goes by The Paralytic at The Paralytic on Instagram and just The Paralytic on all the major streaming platforms. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and end the episode here. I will see you guys next week. Get excited. We've got some guests coming up. We're going to be doing some guest episodes. We've yet to do that on this podcast. So we've got a couple of super exciting guests that are going to be visiting. We're going to be talking about great things. So like I said, get excited for that. And with that, guys, I'm so sorry. Just always so sorry. I'm your host, Niall, and I will see you guys next week.